and I think we will get going. But it's so nice to see so many faces and as Will said, all the different backgrounds. Joanne, I love yours.
Thank you.
and to hear about what's happening in your area of the world. But I think we'll get started. And I would like to welcome you all from the traditional lands of the Nacho-Nayakdun First Nation in north central Yukon Territory. I'd like to give a special welcome to the primate, Linda. So good to have you with us. And to all the members of the Youth Council, the diocesan representatives, and board members of the Primates World Relief and Development Fund. Today, we will also be having some special guests joining us at various times, and we'll try and recognize them all as they join. I also want to have a special welcome to all those that are joining us by YouTube. It's this COVID-19 time is so unusual. It has had its challenges, as you'll hear today, but it's also had its opportunities to explore different ways of doing things. And one is to connect with the larger PWRDF community. So welcome, we're so glad to have as many diocesan reps and youth delegates and board members, but also people who have an interest and in PWRDF. So wonderful to have you here today. The AGM is an important event in any organization's life, and it is a time to connect and a time also to communicate. There are three qualities of a good organization: good governance, transparency, and effectiveness at accomplishing all that is set out to do. I hope that you will take this time to have an opportunity to take part in the business of the organization. YouTubers, if you have a question, you will be able to ask them on the chat line or the chat box on YouTube, and we'll have somebody monitoring that. And of course, all the members that are on Zoom, well, please feel free to ask questions as we go along. At 2 o'clock, we will have an opportunity to engage with some of our partners and to hear how your support of PWRDF is making a difference in the lives of the most vulnerable here and around the world. Also, please have patience with us. This is all new to PWRDF and me and all of us having an AGM by Zoom. So please have patience. We may have to pause and consult with each other, especially about technical issues. So bear with us. So let us begin. I will give the traditional acknowledgement here for all of us. So please at this time just think perhaps of the Indigenous peoples on land that you presently stand on. We acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Indigenous peoples on whose traditional territory we live, work, and worship, wherever we are across this land. We acknowledge our responsibility as treaty members. May our actions be guided by our commitment to reconciliation and to developing a new relationship with the original peoples of this land, one that is based in honor and deep respect. We'd now like to invite Murray to open our meeting with a prayer.
Shall we pause and enter into God's presence? O God of plenty, we celebrate the beauty of the harvest in this season. We delight in the magnificent creation you have entrusted to us. We acknowledge our abundance compared with so many around the world. Help us to share the manna you provide as we work through PWRDF and our partners to end hunger, achieve food security, and promote sustainable agriculture. O God of healing, you are the great physician, promising spiritual health. As your Son taught his disciples to heal, may we use our gifts of memory, reason, and skill to ensure healthy lives and to promote well-being for all. May our efforts reflect your compassion for everyone, everywhere, to overcome the impacts of COVID-19, which threaten our health and the health and lives of those served by our partners. And we give thanks for the opportunity we have through the Primates Fund to work towards the kind of world you would like for all. Amen.
Thank you, Murray. Thank you for that. At this time, we are going to go through a process identifying everyone that is here. And I, at this time, would like to mention that we have been notified by two members, Verna Firth and David Schultz, that they will be late coming. And thank you to all the others too that have let me know that they will have to leave early. Thanks for that notification. So for the roll call, I'll turn this over now to Michelle, who will explain how we're going to do it. Thank you.
Hello everybody. I'm going to post a link in the Zoom chat, and you can go and follow the link and enter your name and identify whether you are a board member or Dawson reps. So I will just follow the link and fill out the form that's in the link. Thank you.
If you would go ahead and do that, we'll just take a few minutes.
Yeah.
Perhaps while this is happening, I will let the people, let everyone know that the documents that we will be looking at today, the financial documents, as well as the annual report of PWRDF, will all be available on the web page. I believe the annual report is up there as well. Is that right, Will?
I don't think the annual report is quite ready yet, but it'll be ready very, very soon. Carolyn, maybe correct me if I'm incorrect, but it's just going to final production and sharing. It'll be there very, very soon.
Okay.
I think Carolyn's nodding, so we're good on that. It's going to be great, so please do take a look at it when it arrives.
Thank you. but the financial papers are up on the website.
I'm on my tablet and I'm not seeing the box. Do I have to go to another screen? It's Ruth in Sudbury.
Sorry, do you have the link open?
I entered it through email.
Okay. I can enter you manually, that's okay.
Okay, it's Ruth Corsten in Sudbury, Diocese of Moosonee.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I'm technically challenged.
Yes, it's Wilma in Coppell, and I'm the same. Sorry.
Thanks, Wilma. Thank you, Ruth. I think Michelle is counting. While she's doing that, I will let you know that during this annual general meeting, most of the motions have already been distributed. They have also been voted on, but there will be some from the floor. And please bear with us as we do make some motions by floor. I will probably, when it comes to voting, say something like any opposed. And if you are opposed, just unmute and say yes. And that will be sufficient. Thank you. Yes. Okay. And we have a question from Rosalind that she doesn't see the financial information or anything but images on us. No, the financial papers will be on the PWRDF web page. So you would have to go back to your Google and find PWRDF. And I see that Will has put that link right there in the chat line. And I always just use the little question box and find it there. So I think I will pass this over now to Basil as our secretary. Did you get the message, Basil, from Michelle?
We have 30 members attending this meeting. As we require 16 for a quorum, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Basil. Thank you for your hard work there, Michelle. And let us proceed. So we have an agenda before us. And the first item on the agenda is the approval of it. And it has been distributed. And Michelle has it here on a slide. And we have a motion that the AGM 2020 agenda be approved as presented. It has been moved by John Clark and seconded by Dan Waterston. Are there any questions or omissions? All right, and we will look at the results. And the election has taken place and the motion has been carried. Thank you. We go now on to the next item of the agenda. It's the approval of the minutes These first set of minutes, and actually the only one, is the minutes of the annual general meeting of September 27th, 2019.
Madam President.
Yes, we have a motion on the floor that the minutes of the September 27th, 2019 annual general meeting of the Primates World Relief and Development Fund be approved. It has been moved and seconded by David Harrison and seconded by Basil Polk. Are there any questions? All right, the vote has been taken and that motion has been carried. And moving on now to the next item. Could we see the agenda again, please? Good. We have some motions we have another motion around the minutes of the AGM of 2019. And it is to ratify the actions of that meeting. And there was in the docket a little explanation of what happened. And we just wanted to share with you that at the time, we did not realize that we did not have an official quorum. We did not realize it at the time. We went through the meeting and we ask at this time, after consulting, we ask at this time that we ratify the actions and the election of directors taken at the 2019 AGM. So the motion is there that the action and election of directors of the 2019 AGM be ratified. We had a mover, Basil Polk, and second by John Clark. Are there any questions? I should just let you know it was, there was no ill intent. It just happened. We miscounted. And it was at the executive meeting in June that we decided that we needed a ratification at this time of the board's actions in September 2019. Any questions? Well, the vote has been taken and that has carried. Thank you. We now move on to some amendments to the bylaws, and I would invite Basil to present these amendments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm bringing two sets of amendments to our bylaw for your approval. Bylaw number 1 provides that the board may amend it, provided that they then submit the changes to the next annual meeting for the members to ratify. Assuming that happens, the amendments remain in effect retroactive to the day they were approved by the board, in our case, May the 14th, 2020. This is why if you looked at the current version of the bylaw on the PWRDF website before this meeting, it may have looked as if there was no issue. All the amended pieces are already in place. I realize that this may be somewhat confusing, but it's nevertheless correct procedure. Accordingly, as you have already received the wording of the amendments in some depth and at considerable length, there is no need to rehearse them again. And starting with the Youth Council, I move that this annual meeting concur with the action of the board and approve the amendments made to Articles 3.01C and 3.03. Insert a new Section 10, Youth Council, with new articles 10.01, 10.02, 10.03, and 10.04. Renumber and rename the existing section 10 as section 11, committees, and renumber existing sections 11, 12, and 13 as sections 12, 13, and 14. And this motion is seconded by Mike McKenzie. And before we go on to the second piece, over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Basil. Yes, are there any questions about these motions, this motion, or these amendments? Okay, thank you, Basil, for that good introduction. And as everyone has seen them, and you explained so well, they are in effect. So the vote has been taken, and this motion has been carried. Thank you. And back to you, Basil.
Okay, proceeding on, we have also amended section 4. The first paragraph of Article 4.03 has been simplified and amended to read, notice of the time and place of a meeting of members will be given to each member by telephonic, electronic, or such communications facility not less than 21 or more than 35 days before the day on which the meeting is to be held, or by such other reasonable means such as mail, courier, or personal delivery as a member may request. So I move, seconded by John Clark, that this amendment be approved.
Thank you, Basil. Thank you, John. Are there any questions about this motion? Okay, hearing none. The voting has taken place, and I'd like to inform you that it has been carried. Thank you to the Governance Committee for putting together these amendments and keeping us as current and as relevant as possible. We now move to the next item on the agenda, the election of directors. And at this time, I'd like to turn the mic over to Lillian, our Chair of Nominating.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, everyone, for reviewing the nominations for PWRDF's Board of Directors and for voting. David Harrison, Basil Pogue, and Jillian Hoyer have been re-elected to the PWRDF Board of Directors. And a new member, Mark Halleck, I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, is the new member elected to the Board of Directors. Thank you also for ratifying the appointment of Bishop Jenny Anderson as the House of Bishop Representative and Verna Firth as the Anglican Council of Indigenous People, or ACIP, representative. I would like to introduce and appoint Jane Dietrich as the Honorary Associate of the PWRDF, and in normal circumstances, we would have presented her with a certificate. But during these unprecedented times, we're just going to show you the certificate on the screen, and then we'll have to mail it to her. Thank you, Jane, for your many years of dedication and commitment to many ministries, many organizations, to Christ Church in Vancouver, and to the work of PWRDF. Jane, we recognize and appreciate your gifts and commitment and are very happy to recognize you here today for your continuing role as ambassador for PWRDF ministry. I will now make a motion that the election ballots be deleted in this case, because they are computer.
Good. Yes, thank you, Lillian. We have a motion on the floor. I believe we have a seconder. Valerie, is that right? Valerie Isaac?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Valerie. We have a motion to destroy the ballots, the electronic ballots, whatever way possible. And at this point, we will see if there's any questions about that. Thank you. There aren't. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Hearing none, it's carried. Thank you, Lillian, and the nominating committee for your work putting together a slate of people to run for board membership. We really appreciate all the hard work that goes into that, and also for working to find an honorary associate. So I'd like to congratulate Jane myself. Jane is not with us today. She is working. I received Will and I both received an email explaining that she was unable to attend today. But we will send the certificate out to her and hope that her little parish will make a bit of a fuss over her. She also mentioned that she is preparing for the Ride for Refuge. So her good works continue. So congratulations one more time, Jane. Thank you. So now we will move over to Dan, our treasurer, and the presentation and acceptance of the audited financial statements for 2019-2020.
Hello there all. It's so nice to be able to look people in the faces, but I have to go back and forth to see you all at once. We are 15 minutes ahead of the schedule, Valerie. I'd like people just to take a deep breath, shake your hands out, stand up and sit down, because we've got a long afternoon. And let's have a 1 minute break, not a nature break, but just a little, take another moment of contemplation. And I'm going to stand just to lead you to the way. Pretend I'm, it feels so much better. Come on, Greg, you can do it. I can tell you. Yes, way to go. And welcome.
Sorry, Dan, then you'll see me in my jammies.
Oh, you see, I've even got shoes on. So I've been really good. It just helps. I think we should also welcome all these new youth members of this board meeting, the AGM meeting, if I may say. It's great to have all these people smiling and love to be sharing what we've got going. Will has already put in that chat box at the bottom a link to the financial statements. So if you haven't gone there to look at them before, you can click on the little box that says chat and then click on Will's thing and it'll take you so you can look at them. They're worth looking at because it's a month that for some reason is memorable. March 31st, 2020. I mean, what a time to have a year end. And we survived it. We had an audit that got delivered these financial statements to us in spite of it all. And for those who can't go on the link, I'll just hold it right here so you can read them all very carefully, okay? You can see they do exist. There are financial statements. Because it was March 2020, at the end of that month, the stock market was really afraid of what was ahead. And our financial statements include us booking the drop in the market over the course of those 12 months to be over $750,000. That was the, oh my gosh moment. And it's since recovered. It's not all the way back, but it's getting darn close. So our marketable securities go up and down. We didn't sell at the bottom of March 31st, I promise. We just sat there and held our breath a bit. The financial statements of this organization are very strong. It was a wonderful year. If you look on, it takes 3 pages, but the first 3 pages are our auditors telling us that they've reviewed it as best they can, except for cases of people donating at parishes and parishes not telling us about it. But other than that, we know everything that's going on. Not a major quibble about anything. And the audit, we'll let the Audit and Risk Committee discuss that soon, Jillian. So on page 1 is where my work starts. The bottom left corner, there's lines for people to sign. As of yesterday, the board of directors decided to sign these, and Julia's signed some, and I've signed some virtually because everything else we seem to do around here is now virtual. The statement of financial position on that page 1 shows that we have net assets unrestricted of over $2.5 million and net assets designated primarily by the internal restrictions from the board of $4.6 million for a total asset base of over $7 million. And we're working hard to make that the assets we have be just as, speaking now as chair of the investment committee, we've moved during the course of that year, some assets, almost $1 million of assets, into more impacted investments, socially impact investments, primarily using Van City Bank and Raven Capital Partners, but we still have Oikle Credit as well in that kind of social impact investments. So it's not strict, oh my gosh, I wonder what these investments are. We're trying to work just as hard with the investments as we do with everything else. Page 3 is a highlight of the year. And what happened, an awful lot of Global Affairs Canada work was winding down. We thought it was the end of All Mothers and Children Count, which we sometimes call AMCC, but it was actually just almost the end. And then we just got ourselves into another little piece of it for this year. But look at the total revenue of 11.6 million, total expenses in program of 9.5 million. So we delivered an awful lot of program during the year. Unprecedented, I think. And then administration and fundraising. If you take the total administration and fundraising on that statement, I'm on a page that looks sort of like this. If you read my scroll at the bottom, it says that we ran at 9.3% of administration as a total revenue percentage. So under 10% administration and fundraising together of the total revenue for audit purposes that year. Of course, at the bottom, it does mention the fact that the market had gone down by over $750,000. So that's the end of page 3. I can stop me at any time because instead of having 10 minutes to talk about this, I've got that huge time gap, but it's fun. The next cash flows, this is an interesting statement to accountants. I think all we have to know is that cash came in, cash went out. Our cash at the beginning of the year went down during the year because we used it in all of these various activities that we were carrying on. If we turn to page 5, I then get into all these notes, some of which are of interest. Pension plan to some of us at a certain age. Marketable securities, there's an highlight as to how we're sitting. Deferred contributions from Global Affairs Canada, that's at the bottom of page 6. That's because we thought this was the end of the Global Affairs Canada contributions. The deferred that had come in at the beginning of the year, the places where we had received the money but hadn't delivered the program, we delivered all the program. And at the end of the year, our deferred contributions were sitting at nothing, the first time in 4 years. And then a little bit about other deferred contributions. For those who don't know, we have an arrangement with General Synod at 80 Hayden Street. So we don't own the office premises, but we work through General Synod. In what they describe in here as an arrangement. Designated net assets, that's what the normal. And Global Affairs Canada, some of the funds that came in for Global Affairs Canada, we gave to the partners, but the partners hadn't spent it all. They had the funds in partners' hands. Global Affairs Canada likes to make sure that that money is actually being spent. So $83,000 is fine. And subsequent to this audit, we were doing a special audit that Global Affairs Canada wanted to do for the projects. And we had glowing audit reports on those. Thanks to staff working through a time of COVID and still being able to do all this reporting. And so that's my quick overview of the audited financial statements of March 31st. And we are in a strong position at the beginning of this whole pandemic. And it's still a position that's not desperate, if I may talk about many other organizations stated in today. So I'd like to make the motion that's sitting on our agenda, which says moved that the audited financial statements for April 1st, 2019 to March 31st, 2020 be accepted. Oh, actually, I'm not doing that moving. Let's hear from a mover. I think he's on, wasn't he?
I think it's David here. I believe I am the mover of that.
And I will be the seconder, David.
And I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, David and Dan. And there is, I know, one question that I've seen in the Zoom group chat from Jeff. Designated assets are funds that have now have not been allocated, he asks. They're not designated by individual donors. Perhaps you could explain.
Well, for those, there are two kinds. When the donations that are designated by given donors are not part of our bottom of the balance sheet. So you get to the right page here, page 1. So we have, if you see above the net assets, we have deferred contributions and we have other deferred contributions. Those other deferred contributions are things that given donors have said, this must be used for such and such. It's not our money, it's just passing through. The ones at the bottom, the net assets, the part of the 7.3 million, unrestricted, you can all understand. Designated means but designated by the board. So the board has designated two kinds. If you turn to note 7 on page 7, there's a contingency fund for $4 million. It was originally 3, and it's the last couple of years it's been at $4 million. That the board's designated net assets of $4 million. So we can't just spend them anywhere. The board wants to restrict it a bit for a responsible wind down of projects in progress and other related expenses in the event of an unexpected cessation of funding. So that's the 4 million. And then the other is projects which the board has committed to, but which have not actually had the funds flowed because maybe the project's not all the way through yet or in the very beginning state. So there's two kinds of designation. Designated are the ones of our own assets, and the ones above it called other deferred contributions from note 5 are where the donor has restricted it. It's not our money at all.
Yeah, I just wanted confirmation of that.
Thank you,
it's
Jeff.
a funny term to use there, designated, because you really mean allocated funds, and I just wanted confirmation of that.
That's right, allocation of our own funds, not. But we haven't, that $4 million, we didn't write a check to ourselves. And we've just said, we don't want to spend that on anything else other than winding down in case of a cessation of funding. And nowadays we're all worrying about cessation of funding and stuff. The good news is because our organization has that strong asset base, the government of Canada really looks at us as a partner that they like doing business with. That they know that if there's something going on delaying their funding, which happened during the year where the promised checks don't appear for months and months from the government, we still can carry the project will be delivered on time, and then we'll wait for the money from the government. Any other good questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. And we do have a motion on the floor, and it's been moved in second. If there are any other questions, there is another question period at the end of after the panel discussion, and we can follow up at that time with more questions. Good, thank you.
I have a question, which I sent to you. Could I ask it now?
Jane, could you hold it perhaps? Or, well, go ahead, Jane, please.
No, that's fine. If we're running out of time, that's fine.
I just want to make sure that we're on time for the panel's people coming in. But sure. Right after that, Jane, I will remember that you are there and waiting, and we'll make sure that I get your question. Thanks, Jane, and we'll direct it to Dan. Okay. Thank you.
Jillian's on the same sort of a topic. Jillian is going to be talking about audit and risk, so maybe Jane's question will be relevant there as well.
Excellent, good point. Thank you. So we do have a motion on the table, and the vote has been taken, and it was carried. So thanks very much to the Treasurer and the Financial Committee, and also the Investment Committee for the good work to have us in this position that we're in at this time. So thank you.
I'd like to thank Michelle, who just unmuted me, which I've never had done to me before. Thank you, Michelle. That was wonderful. I didn't realize I was muted, and suddenly I wasn't muted. I'd also like to thank the finance staff, Elsa, Alice, and all the others in finance who have worked at home separately without access to the records which are in the office, and yet still somehow been able to deliver all this work.
Thank you for doing that. Yes, of course. And now we move on to the Audit and Risk Management Committee, and that's over to Jillian.
Thanks, Valerie. And thanks, Dan, for your presentation on the audited financial statements. As Dan said, as a part of the board's process with the annual audit, the Audit and Risk Management Committee meets with our auditor at least each year in order to review the draft audited financial statements. We also have the ability to call on him as a resource to ask questions throughout the year. Our auditor, Brendan Penny-Legion, echoed what Dan has just said in his joy in working with the PWRDF staff who somehow managed to pull off all of the cooperation for the audit this year in the face of not being able to get into the office for all of their paperwork, but still managed to be incredibly competent and organized and cooperative. And so as Dan said, he raised no flags with the audit. But my role here today is to move the appointment of our auditor for another year. And so I will move that Penny-Legion Chung LLP be appointed to conduct the PWRDF annual audit. It's moved by myself, it's seconded by Basil Pogue.
Thank you, Jillian, and thanks to your committee for their work that they have done on this. Are there any questions? All right, I would say that the vote has been completed and that motion has been carried. And now we move on to my report, and I'm very pleased to be able to give you a little update on what's been happening from my point of view in this past year. What a year we've had. COVID has not only impacted the health of people, it has also shaken economies around the world. It is spreading, and it's still spreading, illness, disruption, and hunger across social, political, and cultural boundaries. And the call to care for the world and its vulnerable is stronger than ever, especially at this time when we're made aware that vulnerability is something we all share. Change is more than ever a function of the environment in which PWRDF works. Back in September, we anticipated the close of our All Mothers and Children Count program by March 2020. We were looking to develop new proposals with the Canadian government. We had just completed year one of a strategic plan and initiated an organizational structure review with an outside contractor. We were developing goals to refresh our structure with an emphasis on a sustainable future. We were looking to build intentional support for our volunteers into what we do. We were developing measures to assess the impact of our programs. We were looking at ways to be more involved with Indigenous peoples. And then the great disruptor, COVID-19, struck. Our March board meeting in Winnipeg was canceled. All the preparations and celebrations planned by local volunteers were never realized. Parishes, dioceses, and all institutions have been affected by the uncertainty that COVID brings. Fortunately, the board was already working to evaluate and assess our readiness for the future and was now charged with adapting to this fast-changing world. COVID means that the vulnerable are now even more vulnerable. Staff have been working with partners to modify their programs to keep recipients and workers safe. Funds have been sent to partners in 7 countries, including an agency here in Canada, directing support to vulnerable seniors in Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. We were grateful to receive further funding from the Canadian government to help our All Mothers and Children Count partners prepare for and respond to the pandemic, as well to sustain gains made in the health and well-being of the communities and families that this program serves. The board of PWRDF has been working to assess the risks to the organization so that we can continue to support our partners and our work among the most vulnerable. Over many years, the organization has been developing an investment account, enabling us to respond quickly and efficiently to unforeseen events. That's the contingency fund that Dan was speaking of. Safeguards and a strategy to disperse funds as needed has been put in place. The budget has been revised and updated to allow for the possibility of reduced revenues and different costs. Many thanks to the Treasurer, the Investment, Finance, and Audit and Risk Management Committees for their foresight and skill in safeguarding our financial resources. Building for a sustainable future requires that we continue to find ways to engage supporters and to fundraise. All board committees are actively monitoring our activities and keeping us on track and focused. The executive and nominating committees have recognized the need for a larger board to take on and accomplish all these heightened roles and responsibilities. As a board, we're becoming more intentional in inviting volunteers to provide expertise to our working groups and committees. An advisory group of Indigenous leaders is helping the development team focus on how best to accompany First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. PWRDF staff has been successful in reaching out to foundations and other like-minded organizations for partnership funding. We hope to continue to widen the circle of PWRDF supporters. A working group of the board is engaged with our fundraising staff to enlarge our fundraising possibilities. Board members, youth, diocesan, and parish representatives are being encouraged to get further involved together in efforts to fundraise, to address global issues like climate change, to engage together in fundraising events like the Ride for Refuge campaign, in which people are riding, walking, or crocheting in support of St. Jude's Family Projects in Uganda. Our World of Gift catalog is appearing very soon, creating opportunities for families and parishes to choose gifts that will help our global neighbors. Support for our All Mothers and Children Count COVID response will be matched sixfold. For every $1 donated, Global Affairs provides a further $6 to further help our partners. I'm proud to be president of PWRDF, and I'm proud to say that together we are helping to make a difference. The staff and board have been creative in working through these unpredictable times, keeping communications and connections strong, and maintaining programs at a time when they're desperately needed. The committees, the Youth Council, and the whole board have been meeting more frequently through Zoom. The staff are finding new ways for PWRDF supporters to connect and keep current with our partners. Informative webinars are available, providing updates on current and relevant issues that are open to all. A weekly gathering. Now it's become bi-weekly now, every 2 weeks. Praying with PWRDF keeps many volunteers connected and mindful of our faith-based work across the world. Please take time to read the annual report and check out the playlist that accompanies it. As I say, it's a new feature that you'll not want to miss, and that it will soon be up on the webpage. I would like to extend a heartfelt thanks to our PWRDF staff who are working under extraordinary conditions to deliver programs and to reach out and engage our supporters. This year, we will celebrate Zaida Baskel's wide-ranging contributions and wish her happy retirement. The staff and all the volunteers have accomplished so much, accumulating in our being recognized as one of 100 top charities in Canada, as reported by Charity Intelligence. Thank you as well to all our supporters. We're grateful for your prayers, support, and patience as we work to evolve our structure to best meet the aspirations of our strategic plan and adapt to these challenging times. I'm grateful for all the volunteers, and especially the ones we're recognizing today. Congratulations to Jane, our newest honorary associate, who has contributed generously her time and talent to PWRDF. We remember also at this time the passing of a former chair of the board, Dorothy Davy Flindle, a thoughtful leader who championed the work of PWRDF and women's rights. And we also thank at this time those that stood for re-election or election to our board for volunteering their time to be with us in the next 3 years. In conclusion, this time of disruption has been a time to examine ourselves and endeavor to become more focused and better at what we do. The board continues to monitor the organization's activities within the changing context where we find ourselves, supporting moves to become more nimble, more effective, and more efficient. With the help of Will and his team, we want to do our very best with the gifts and the prayers of our supporters to care for the most vulnerable, victims of gender violence, hungry households, and refugees around the world. Even more so in the midst of a global pandemic. Be assured that PWRDF will continue to respond to emergencies and focus its efforts on those most at risk and working to empower women and girls. And PWRDF will continue to support partners and communities to become change makers for themselves. Or as Michael would have put it, what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Thank you. And are there any questions? Would someone like to put forth a motion to accept my report?
Valerie, it's John here.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm almost ready for a bit of a holiday. I'm in Bedeque in Nova Scotia. Your report. I'd like to move the acceptance of the report, and as I do so, say a huge thank you to you for your leadership on the board, your kindness and your gentleness. And I have to say that throughout the year, I've noted an awful lot of patience you've had to muster with us as well. So a huge thank you to you, and I'm honored to move this report.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you for both. That's great. So we have a motion on the floor to accept the President's report. Is there a seconder?
I'll second.
Ah, was that Anne?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Second by Anne Walling. Sorry. Any further questions? Are there any opposed? And that motion's carried. And we move on to the next item on the agenda, which I will turn over to Will and Carolyn. It's the volunteer appreciation section.
Thanks. I'll turn it to Carolyn, and maybe Carolyn can say a few words, and then I'll say a few words. So Carolyn.
Thanks, Will. I would like to say a word of thanks to all of our amazing volunteers, our board members, our youth council members, our diocesan reps, our parish reps, and all of our honorary associates. PWRDF truly could not support our partners in the life-changing work that they're doing around the world without each of you. I always used to say that our volunteers keep PWRDF in the hearts and minds of Anglicans in the pews from coast to coast to coast. But this year, you've had to find ways to keep us in the hearts and minds of Anglicans who are not in the pews. It's been a year like no other. The needs are greater than ever for our partners in Canada and around the world who are working to continue their programs, maintain the gains that have been made through their work, and keep their staff and beneficiaries safe. You've stepped up to this challenge, and with us, even as you've been adjusting in your own circumstances to living in a pandemic. You found new ways to continue to share information about PWRDF, holding virtual gatherings in your parishes and dioceses, and raising funds and encouraging people to support us in new and innovative and sometimes challenging ways. For example, Cynthia and Mona recently climbed Grossmorn Mountain. James just completed a 9-day, 72-kilometer hike of the Lake Superior Coastal Trail with his dad. Betty's busy crocheting baby blankets, and Anne is reading 25 Agatha Christie novels. And as a result, we were really knocking it out of the park this year with our Ride for Refuge fundraising, in a year when we thought that that was going to be really challenging. We love seeing many of you at our weekly, soon to be bi-weekly, Praying with PWRDF virtual gatherings, when we come together to pray with and for each other and our partners, to hear and learn from partners, and to build a sense of online community at a time when we can't see each other in person. I wish that we could have held the gatherings that we'd planned this year to be able to say thank you individually. But for now, on behalf of all of us at PWRDF, please know that all of you are in our prayers as members of our PWRDF family, and that we're deeply grateful for your continued support and commitment. Thank you. Will.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. I would just like to take just a further quick moment, but an important moment, to recognize another of our volunteers and share the congratulations offered to her by the Governor General of Canada. The Governor General of Canada has recognized Valerie Mayer this past year with the Sovereign's Medal for Volunteers, La Médaille du Souverain pour les Bénévoles. This medal is being presented to Valerie in recognition of her significant volunteer contributions. I understand the medal is now en route to the Yukon Territory, the Diocese of the Yukon, where there will be an important opportunity to present the medal itself to Valerie. PWRDF is grateful for all of our volunteers, but here we're grateful for Valerie's work. Her work for PWRDF, her work with Indigenous people, her volunteer work in so many parts of this country. We're grateful for all of our board members, diocesan representatives, youth council members, past and present, who have cared for PWRDF for more than 60 years. So everyone can just kind of clap their hands together to thank Valerie for her work, and a big thank you, as Carolyn has also shared, for all of our volunteers. I would just like to ask Kathy Campbell. Kathy Campbell is with us here today to share a few words about someone else who we can recognize and thank today. So Kathy, if I can pass it to you for the next section.
No, you need to unmute.
Thank you. Okay. And thank you to the board and to PWRDF for this opportunity. I am delighted to be able to honor and to thank Jim Cornelius today. He has done more to address global hunger than anyone I know. And I count myself privileged to know him, and I'd like you to know him and to know the work he's done on our behalf. For the past 23 years, he's been the executive director of the Canadian Food Grains Bank and has grown it into a $44 million effort that it is today. CFGB coordinates, inspires, develops, and extends the capacity of 15 Canadian faith-based agencies to work with hundreds of local agencies all over the world who are working with some of the most vulnerable people in need today. And PWRDF is one of CFGB's members. We can do so much more and so much better by collaborating and working together. And CFGB makes that happen in a good way. At CFGB, Christians of every type from all across our country, rural and urban, work together to alleviate and address the causes of hunger in some of the globe's most vulnerable people. And Jim is a pretty amazing person to really draw out the best from all our disparate efforts and make it more and more effective. He's created a great team, a terrific, responsive organization, and a great legacy. Thank you, Jim, for all your work on our behalf and for all your work on the behalf of Hungry around the world. In the words of one of CFGB's most recent posters, indeed, may all be fed here and around the world, now and always. And Jim's just the kind of person that makes that prayer a living reality. Although his eyes are always on national and international issues, he is a man of deep faith, and he's rooted in his local Anglican community here in Winnipeg. We have lots to claim and be proud of. So I'd like to introduce Jim's parish priest, the Reverend Jamie Howison, who's the incumbent and actually creator of St. Benedict's Table, a new Anglican parish in Winnipeg, to say a few words about Jim. Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks, Kathy, and thanks, Jim. Yes, I'm here on the strength of being one of the priests at St. Ben's, where Jim has been active for a number of years, along with managing and overseeing that massive $44 million budget at Food Grains Bank. He's also been our church treasurer with a considerably more modest budget. I am also pleased to call him a friend. And I think the thing that has come through for me so strongly is he's got an incredible tactical mind, a head for numbers, an understanding of statistics, can think so strategically, which is so important at the kind of levels that he's been working. And yet, undergirding that has been that strong sense of the biblical call to be responsible and responsive and generous around matters of food and hunger and development, capacity development. It also comes from his own DNA. He grew up in Africa, in Kenya, in a mission family who were, I mean, he learned to be kind of tireless and passionate. But the most important thing is behind the numbers and the statistics, he always can see the people. There's always a sense that there are real faces behind those numbers. And that's ultimately the reason that it's worth thinking strategically and tactically, because it's for the sake of people. And I so appreciate that. We actually, the two of us sat down on Monday and recorded a podcast which I'll post the link in the comments section before I sign off. It's about a 30-minute conversation, looking back at the work he's done, what took him there, what he's learned, what he now knows, and you get that strong sense of, oh, the people. So thank you, Jim, for that.
Hey, maybe Jim, maybe you can say a few words, Jim, as we just are kind of glowing in your light.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Kathy and Jamie and Will and Valerie for this opportunity. I was thinking back to when I became 23 years ago, and the Anglicans were not a member of the Canadian Food Grains Bank, and I became executive director as an active Anglican. So I put on my to-do list, one of the things I needed to get done was to see if we could find a way to get PWRDF involved. And that took quite a few years. It wasn't as fast as I had hoped. As I'm looking at the screen here, I'm seeing Elsa on the screen here, and she was part of many of those early conversations. And I had just returned to Canada from working in Eritrea, so we had other things to talk about as well as what was happening in Eritrea and the Horn of Africa. But she was part of those early conversations that eventually did lead to PWRF joining, and that has that was one of the things that I could check off, and I'm glad it didn't take 23 years, but took a little longer. And it's been a real delight to have my own denominational body, part of the bigger family, and to be working with Will and others. And Will and Kathy are both on the board, active members of our board, but with others in terms of this mission of ending hunger. Because it is so central to our scriptures. We often speak about the fact that, well, many of the churches in Canada might disagree on a whole range of theological issues. On the issue of our responsibilities to deal with hunger, there is no disagreement, and we can work across all these different bodies together. And it's a true witness to the gospel and to the call of Christ to the work that we need to be doing in the world. So thank you. And I'm stepping down from this role as executive director, but I'm not stepping down from the call of God on my life or my participation in the work of the church. And I'll be finding new ways to stay engaged. And I already know that Kathy and Jamie are going to be trying to find things for me to do. So we'll be having further conversations.
Jim, thanks so much. And thanks for joining us here today. We can say a lot about all that Jim has done, so many good things. But let me just pass it back to Valerie, who can just pass it back to perhaps, or pass it forwards to Bishop Jenny. We're a few minutes behind, but it's all really good. Valerie, how about I pass it back to you? And if you wish to just introduce Bishop Jenny, and we'll carry on with the remaining part of this gathering together.
Okay, thank you, Will. First off, I wanted to just thank Carolyn and Will for organizing that little surprise presentation. I did not know about that award being given today, so I'm very humbled to receive it, and I'm very thankful that I worked with such an amazing group of people, of like-minded people. Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is a panel discussion. And we're ready to go, I think. And I would like at this time just to introduce the Right Reverend Jenny Anderson. She is our representative to the House of Bishops and is the Bishop Suffragant in the Diocese of Toronto and the area of York Credit Valley. And without any further ado, Jenny, I will pass it over to you for this most interesting part, I'm sure.
Thank you so much, Valerie. Of course, Valerie and Jim are a hard act to follow, but I'm delighted to be with you all here today. Some of you on the Zoom call, some of you viewing us on YouTube today. It's terrific to have you all here. As of when I'm speaking, 934,000 people around the world have died of COVID-19. 32 million are infected, and the richest nation in the world has the highest death rate, having just hit the grim milestone of 200,000 deaths. And as this virus that we cannot see and cannot touch continues to wreak havoc, never has partnership been more important. And so I'm delighted to welcome you to this panel discussion on partnership in the time of COVID. Our panelists are going to introduce themselves briefly in just a minute, and then they're going to take some questions from me, and then we will leave some ample time at the end for you to ask questions. And I'd encourage you to type your questions into the chat feature in Zoom or in YouTube. They'll then be collated and handed to me for the end of our time together. So without further ado, I would like to ask Musu, Wade, and Everett to please introduce themselves and their organizations. And if everyone could please keep themselves on mute while our panelists speak. Musu, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to check that I can be heard. Okay. I'm really, really pleased to be representing the Canadian Food Grains Bank today, especially following that tribute to Jim, who will be missed dearly at the Food Grains Bank. We are indeed a coalition, a partnership of 15 church-based agencies that includes PWRDF, working together to respond to this issue of global hunger. And based on the belief that there's enough food in the world to feed everyone, and that God wants that no one goes hungry, and that the church has a part to play in making sure that that's the case. Last year, we provided $42 million in food-related assistance for 866,000 people who are facing hunger in 34 countries due to things like conflict, inequality, climate change, lack of agricultural support, and natural disasters. And our member organizations like PWRDF worked alongside locally based organizations around the world to meet emergency food needs and develop solutions to long-term cycles of hunger. Nice, I'm really pleased to be with you today.
Thanks so much, Musu. Wade.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm joining you guys just outside of New York City, in that richest country in the world. It's nice to be here to see you all. My name is Wade Zamachek. I'm the Director of Development for Village Healthworks. I'm here because the person you probably normally see during these meetings is out on maternity leave. I'm so happy to be part of this, and we're thrilled to count PWRDF as one of our strongest supporters. Village Healthworks is based in rural Burundi, Burundi being in sub-Saharan Africa, one of the poorest countries in the world, one of the hungriest countries in the world, and one of the countries facing some of the most acute health challenges in the world. So we're thrilled to be working with Partners in Health to really focus for the last 4 years on confronting some of the most vulnerable people in Burundi, including women and children. Our story, and it starts with our founder story, and just to briefly, because I don't have that much time, starts with Deo, who escaped genocide in Burundi, landed in New York, and quickly became homeless. While homeless and living in Central Park, a nun found him and helped him, and he was able to regain his strength and eventually ended up going to Columbia and then Harvard. From there, he was able to go back to Burundi and start Village Healthworks. And over the last 15 years, we've created some solutions to multidimensional poverty, mostly focused on health, but also including education, agriculture programs, economic development, and looking at a holistic approach to really solving some of the hardest problems for the hardest people. Today, we're on the cusp of something really new. We're about to open up a hospital, finally delivering surgical capacity to the people of rural Burundi. It'll be a huge game changer, and we're thrilled to almost be there. So more to come on that, but thank you for having me today.
Thanks so much, Wade. And Everard.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me for this conversation. My name is Everard Nahimana. I work with Partners in Health as Africa Region Policy and Partnership Advisor. So Partners in Health is a non-profit organization working in 10 countries across the globe, including Rwanda. And we work with the governments to strengthen health systems, provide high quality of care, mainly for poor, marginalized communities, educate medical professionals, and lead global health research. In Rwanda, over the last 15 years, Partners in Health has been working side by side with the government of Rwanda to strengthen the health system, mainly in 3 districts, covering a network of 3 hospitals, 42 health centers. So in a catchment area of nearly more than 1 million people. And we are not only working with the government, but we are so fortunate to partner with the PWRDF on a number of projects, mainly around maternal, child, newborn care, and recently to support government efforts for a comprehensive COVID-19 response. Again, it's a pleasure, it's a great pleasure to be part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Everard. So my first question is the issues that each of your organizations has been dealing with that you've just told us about. Of course, all those issues existed long before COVID-19. But I'm wondering, what has COVID exposed about these issues that maybe wasn't as apparent before? And how has COVID changed the ways that you're working with local communities and in collaboration with organizations like PWRDF? So what's been exposed and what are you now changing and adapting? Wade, maybe I could ask you to answer first, please.
Sure. Yeah, it definitely has really kind of changed the way we do business in many ways. I would say it's less exposed what was evident and more instead really kind of exposed what we already knew in a much more deep way. And I think that really kind of comes down to 3 things. First, there's inequalities that exist in the world and the most vulnerable often suffer. I think that that's very obvious, but we've seen that as there's resources that are being diverted. So from a fundraising standpoint, we're seeing some money that's being diverted domestically or being diverted to other areas. So that's really starting to help hurt the most vulnerable. There's a study that came out by the Lancet that was looking at worldwide reductions to access to essential health, such as maternity care, vaccinations, family planning, nutrition, partner violence, and child abuse. And the results are really scary in what they're projecting. We're seeing that the availability of a clean birth environment is likely going to be reduced from 69% in Burundi to 35%. We're seeing vaccination rates possibly go down from 90% to 43%. And all of this equates, unfortunately, like I said, to vulnerable communities being affected and dying. We're likely going to see 10,000 additional child deaths possibly in Burundi on the worst case scenario. Maternal deaths can also, we're expected could possibly go up to 50% higher. And this is not just deaths due to COVID. This is deaths due to resources being diverted because of COVID. So I think that's important to say. The second thing that we've realized and that COVID has helped us realize is that planning matters and that having people on the ground with the expertise to really manage these things is important. When COVID hit in March, we were lucky to have 125,000 gloves and 5,000 N95 masks and respirators already in supply. I think this really lets you know that once these things hit and the global supply chain stops, you have to be able to have these supplies there. So planning is essential. The other thing that's important is you need the people that know what's going on. We had doctors that lived through Ebola in neighboring Congo and knew how to respond to these things immediately. We knew that getting hand sanitizer was tough, but we had people on the ground who knew how to make homemade hand sanitizer in our facility. And so we were able to have those things done. And then the other thing that is just clear is that having connections to the community is essential. Village Healthworks is a Burundian-led organization. 99.5% of our staff is Burundian. Our CEO is Burundian. And for us to be able to really respond appropriately, we need to have those connections in the community. So having 200 community health workers that PWRDF has helped us fund and even expand over the last 4 years has been key to making sure that we're able to solve local problems with local people. This includes, everything from educating people on the ground, making sure that there's proper wash techniques that are being used, to working with our local sewing co-op to make beautiful Katanga masks. So I think we've been able to respond appropriately in these senses. The other thing is, how have we changed local communities? I think our initial focus is like really saying we need to act. How do we initially deal with these things? And then the other one is, how do we then pivot to what are the long-term solutions? Dr. Everett is saying, the need to strengthen healthcare communities, health systems. For us, that's going to be essential. And so moving forward, we need to think about what that means in Burundi, where there's very limited resources to do that.
Thanks so much, Wade. There's some challenging statistics there, but encouraging to see how you're working on the ground to meet those. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Sue, how would you find in your context, what is COVID exposed, and in what different ways are you now working with local communities?
Well, I would say that many of the things that Wade just mentioned would be reflected in what we're seeing. But one thing that I want to emphasize is that COVID has really exposed the extent of the vulnerabilities and the extent to which these vulnerabilities create inequalities that lead to people facing hunger at high crisis levels. For example, women are disproportionately affected. You've heard Wade talk about the effect on maternity, on maternal health care. However, there's also the fact that women are on the forefront of family care. Social norms often involve a high workload burden for women in many parts of the world and in many of these developing countries in which we're working. And their workload burden has increased further with children out of school. And if people fall ill, they would most likely to be looking after the sick. And that further reduces the time that they have already dealing with time poverty to do things like to farm, to harvest, to get food to market, and to access food in different ways that they need to. So it's really exposed the extent of the vulnerabilities that people are living with and the depth of the inequalities that we live with in the world. Children who depend on school meal programs, for example, have lost a source of food and nutrition. The World Food Programme is reporting that at the height of the school cancellations around the world this year, 368 million children, and just pause to think about that magnitude of that number, were missing school meals globally. In Canada, for example, we saw an increased reliance on food banks. But we also have a social safety net, a government that's able to access funds to ensure that that impact is reduced. And in the countries where we work, where that's not the case, and people are depending on a daily wage, don't have access to refrigeration or unreliable electricity, even if they had income, they're not able to buy enough to store because they can't afford to have it go bad. So these kinds of things, the extent has really been exposed in a new way. Things like coping mechanisms of people who are living in poverty, skipping meals, eating less food, buying cheaper food that's less nutritious, is increasing malnutrition already. And this will have long-lasting impacts on physical and developmental effects, especially for children under 5. And so if families have to get to the point where they're selling assets like livestock or tools, it's going to take them years and years to recover from the effects of the pandemic this year. So that's why I'm emphasizing it's really the extent that it's been exposed. So food production itself has not necessarily been affected, but again, the disruptions to the food supply means that food producers might have less access to markets, which mean they have difficulty accessing inputs like seeds or tools or fertilizers that allow them to grow more and better food, or to labor that can't get to the farms to work, and or to normal transport that requires them to get the food to market. to sell for
especially
income.
if they've had to sell any of their assets that you've just listed, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or if they live in an area where there's no bus, good government transportation or public infrastructure. So normal transport has been disrupted or it's been halted in order to stop the spread of COVID-19. So they can't get to market to sell for income or to supply the communities. So the impact is on their families, but on their communities as a whole, because if they can't get food to markets, the whole community is suffering. I think the second half of the question is how we're working with local communities. How has it changed the way we're working with local communities? I think for us, the first priority was, of course, to assure the safety of local program staff and the people we serve. So like everybody around the world, that was the first thought is, okay, how do we keep people safe? Approving funds for personal protective equipment and conducting distributions over longer periods of time, working with local staff to come up with solutions that are best in their context. So it might have included delivering distributions directly to households instead of using distribution centers, or providing 2 months of food instead of numerous distributions every month. Second, we focused on small scale farmers to support their efforts to secure their livelihoods and to supply food to their communities during the pandemic. We've secured additional grant funding from the Government of Canada to add 3 million of programming in 5 countries in East and Southern Africa: Ethiopia, Kenya, Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. And PWRDF is co-funding a COVID-19 response in Kenya to strengthen market linkages and help vulnerable households acquire drought-tolerant seeds, poultry, and goats. Those are the kinds of things we're doing. And that's just one example. I wanted to link it directly to PWRDF today.
Great. Thank you so much, Misu. Everard, I'm sure you would echo many of the things that your colleagues have just been talking about, how it's exposed inequity at a deeper level and disrupted some of the ways that we can partner with people to help them. But what else would you be able to add about what's been exposed thanks to COVID, and how might your organization be adapting to partner with local organizations differently?
Yeah, thank you. I can't agree more with my colleagues, but I wanted also to highlight a couple of things. One is a strong leadership, strong organization from the government, which is really very key to set up like a system to mitigate the impact of COVID. You know, since this pandemic started, since we had the first person who was infected back in March, the government of Rwanda, you know, established a very strong task force coordination mechanism at the central level, and then later decentralized that mechanism at the district level. That was very, very essential to coordinate the response, to mobilize resources from different partners, communities. I found that very, very important because we also know there were many people, many organizations who were willing to support, but without a strong coordination, a strong guidance from the government, that couldn't really happen. So that strong communication. And for us, PIH, Partners in Health, it was very easy to step in and support government efforts, whether at the central level, but also at the district level. That's one. Two, I think it's very important also to highlight the foundation, the health system as a foundation. Many countries with weak or disrupted health system, they saw the burden of COVID really, really high. So Rwanda took that advantage because they built a strong foundation with health facilities, district hospitals that are equipped with trained healthcare workers, community health workers, actually to use that platform for COVID-related interventions. So we saw, the government turning some health centers into isolation centers,
right,
to use some of the lab capacity already in place for COVID testing. That's I think was very, very key. And then I'll add, I would say partnership or collaboration even between organizations. So I would give an example with the lockdown. We saw routine health services disrupted. Pregnant women can't reach facilities. Children with their parents, when they're sick, they couldn't reach the health facilities because the transport system was down. So we partner with an organization called Zipline that uses drones to deliver medication for patients who with chronic diseases who used to go to the nearest hospital to take medication. So we partner with them to deliver medication. So we were able to deliver a medication for 100 patients across the country. So these are drones that fly from a certain place with medication, and then they will drop near the health center or the hospital where the patient can go and take those medications. Yeah, so just wanted also to highlight kind of innovation, but also collaboration between local organizations.
That's great. Thank you, Everard. And that's a good example for me to ask my next question. And Musu, I'm going to ask if you could start first. Could you give some examples of challenges and opportunities that you and your organization have had to face under many of these issues with COVID-19? And have you learned any lessons yet? It might be too early. We're only 6 months in, but any lessons learned from those challenges and opportunities?
Yes, I don't know. Like you say, we're still learning, and we're still discovering what all those challenges will be. But I think one of the biggest confirming lessons, if anything, has been that local organizations are really best placed to determine the solutions for particular local challenges. For an organization like ours that work in 34 different countries, if we had taken the attitude of one size fits all, or determining here, how people are to adapt in various places in the world, that would not have gone very well, because the variety of innovation to adapt to circumstances has been very encouraging. And I just want to give a few examples that I've heard of in the course of my work. Local organizations have changed what types of food they're providing, because certain commodities that had been predetermined to be included in food baskets, say during distributions and emergencies, might not have been available. And so they've substituted with they've made local substitutions. They've changed the types of assistance that they're giving. So converting parts of assistance from food baskets to cash or vouchers, or the other way around, depending on the particular circumstances. They've revised who they're targeting based on who is emerging as most vulnerable. They've revised who they're targeting and who they give priority for support in emergency situations. And of course, having to take into consideration all the time country-specific guidances on border restrictions and COVID prevention measures within a country, or even within a different region within a country. But also when we're talking about our long-term responses to agriculture and livelihood situations, we've seen local based organizations change training approaches and resorting to phone and text messaging in order to continue to deliver training locally. And one of the advantages for us, because of when we work with a member like PWRDF and they're working with a local organization, we didn't have to face issues like trying to repatriate staff. The staff was already there, and staff didn't have to move out of the communities. So they were able to do things like provide one-on-one field support instead of group support, and look at mobile platforms for facilitating savings. There's a wonderful story out of Kenya that we've just heard from one of our staff, where they started off, providing face masks and soap and not knowing what to do. And then when they realized they were not able to access fertilizer, developed with the local partner, Fidelity Trust, for fertilizer based on local plants. And the quote from our staff has been that one very silver lining, without taking away from the real suffering of people, has been that this has pushed us in directions that will make us better in what we do, even post-pandemic. And so that has been amazing to see.
Isn't that wonderful, Musio? I've heard that in the context of local churches, that the pandemic has pushed us in some directions where we needed to go anyway. So I'm glad to hear that in your context as well. Wade, can you share any examples of challenges and opportunities under COVID, and any lessons that you and your organization are learning, realizing that it's early days?
Yeah, definitely. It is early days. I think it's important to note that COVID really hasn't ravaged our community. We've only seen about 500 cases in Burundi. A lot of that is probably due to lack of testing, but we're in a very rural part, and even talking to our chief medical officer based on the ground there, we have not seen a huge uptick in cases right now. That being said, we've done a lot to prepare for that. And I think I stressed that in my earlier comments, that it's essential that you prepare. And this new round of support with PWRDF is going to be key to replenishing a lot of those needed things that we need, whether it be gloves, masks, bleach, but also, so I think that's been, it's important to note that we haven't seen a huge spike right now. That being said, I think one of the key lessons that we've learned is that it's important to educate, I think, partners in many ways on what we're seeing. And then also to help them kind of think about how to respond to this pandemic in a much more broad way, especially in a place where we're not seeing people dying of COVID. So what we've been doing is educating a lot of our funders and our partners to think about the response to COVID-19 as a way to strengthen our response to future problems or current problems as well, and to just broaden that. And so for us, we're building, like I said, a hospital. The hospital should be done in the next 6 months. But if you look at really how to respond to COVID-19, obviously, well, not obviously necessarily in the United States sometimes, but masks are essential, gloves, PPE is essential. You need that stuff. But without certain things like oxygen, ventilators, the ability to isolate patients, a modern health facility, properly trained staff, there's no ability to confront this. And really where we are in rural Burundi, there's not those things. So we're building a 150-bed hospital that will have those things. So we've spoken to partners, like PWRDF or other people to say, like, hey, we do need help with some of the basic stuff to make sure that sanitation's happening. We do need help with gloves and things like that. But we've really positioned our response to COVID to define it as health strengthening. And that essential part of health strengthening is having the health facility to build that. So with that, we're really excited to see this move forward. We'll be able to not only confront COVID when and if it hits our community, when this hospital is done, but really be able to respond to the myriad of other problems that are affecting our community, including one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world, the fact that over half the population in Burundi got malaria last year. So I think like these are serious issues, COVID. We're not trying to minimize it, but we really recognize that there's so many other issues that are confronting Burundi in a place where tuberculosis is still prevalent or HIV rates are still high. So I think for us, it's an important lesson to really kind of help educate partners about where we need to pivot, how we need to think about this response in many ways, and broaden what the expectations are. There's many ways that, the cookie crumbs can help the people of the poor, and that's true, but we really do need to be able to provide modern, quality, dignified care to really confront this disease and the most vulnerable parts of it.
Thanks, Wade. I'm going to ask Everett the last question as well, but we're about to turn it over to you, our viewers, to ask questions as well. So please feel free in the chat function to send your questions in, and we'll get those collated and sent to me in just a minute. But Everard, we'd love to hear from you. about examples of those kind of challenges and opportunities that you're seeking to address under COVID, and what your organization or you personally are learning at this time.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the pandemic is still there. Sub-Saharan Africa seems to be not to be affected as much as other Western countries, but for reasons we can't really tell. But I think it's very essential for any pandemic or outbreak to think about the most vulnerable people. You know, of course, the pandemic affects everyone, but it's very essential to also think about the most vulnerable, the people who live very far. Sometimes most of the interventions, it's very easy to reach people in the cities, but it's very key to also think about how can we support the most vulnerable people, communities. That's one. Two, you know, yesterday it was Ebola, HIV, Zika. Today is COVID. Maybe tomorrow there will be another pandemic. We don't know. How can we make investments that will last not only for COVID, but also could contribute to mitigate the impact of any other pandemic?
Yes,
so,
that's similar to what Wade was just saying about the hospital.
Yes, so together with the PWRDF and the government of Canada, what we are trying is to strengthen the infrastructure at the hospital and health center level. For example, we are trying to see if we can put in place the supply chain with oxygen plants so that those investments will last. They will help for COVID, but they will also support even for routine services.
Right.
Yeah, so the other lesson is about distance learning. How can we use technologies to deliver continuous, to capacitate healthcare providers, to reach healthcare providers that are very far. So we have started to establish a distance learning program with healthcare providers, midwives, nurses, doctors, to be able to, have skills and knowledge to tackle the COVID. But also we hope we could also use the same platform for other in the future. Yeah.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Everard. And it'd be wonderful to see how that impact of technology could be reflected in both what Musu and Wade were talking about in their context as well going forward. Friends, we now have some time for questions that are coming from you. And I think Michelle was going to send me any questions that have come through. And it may be that these three amazing panelists have done just such a terrific job that at this stage there's not any other questions. Do people want to type a question for any of our panelists in the chat function? Or if anybody simply wants to raise their hand and unmute themselves, I'd be happy to hear your question.
I think Jeff Strong has a good question, if I have read that correctly. If you want to just share that, Jeff.
Where's your question, Jeff?
Once you unmute there, yeah.
Yeah, so I can see it there. Wade, you mentioned funds being diverted to or from COVID.
Yeah, well, I think—
Can you say a bit more about that?
Sure can, yeah. I think there's some partners. The people on the line here being one of them, who've really leaned in and recognized that this is a time to help their partners and has given more. A lot of our funding is coming from the United States, and we're also seeing some funders who are really focused on domestic issues, whether it be the election or Black Lives Matter or the response to COVID in the United States. And so I think we're seeing from, you're asking the development director, so this is something I know a lot about. We're seeing both things. We're seeing people that are starting to really lean in and they see this as an opportunity to help Sub-Saharan Africa or the regions we're in, but we're also seeing a lot of people say, hey, not right now. Anytime you also see an economic dip, you also see a drop of funds. So there are funds being diverted in that sense. So to find people like COVID or like PWRDF to really lean in right now is a huge help, especially to a small organization like Village Healthworks. We don't have a huge endowment, and so it's not like we're living day to day. But this type of multi-year commitment that we get from PWRDF helps us expand the capacities to treat people, to make inroads into new communities. So I think it's important to thank you guys for that.
Thanks, Wade.
Yeah.
You meant your donations, not funds within Burundi being diverted. Is that right?
Yeah, I meant donations. Yeah. There really aren't many government funds that are being used that we're seeing in the rural parts. It's important to note. I mean, I think like if you can look at the response that Everard is describing in Rwanda, it's very different in Burundi in many ways. There's just really not the same type of infrastructure in Burundi to respond to those things, despite the fact that the countries are very similar and basically touching each other, or not even basically sharing a border. Yeah. But that's, I think, another thing to drive the importance of partnership. I mean, it's important to note, I think, that Partners in Health and Village Healthworks are sister organizations. There is collaboration across the border there. We share both board members, we share resources. We're working with them to expand capacity to train doctors at their medical facility up in Butaro, as well as have their doctors train at our facility in Kigutu. So I think there's these cross-border areas of collaboration that's essential in these areas as we look to build the systems to confront both COVID and the next pandemic that comes and affects our part of the world.
Maybe it's wishful thinking on my part, but I wonder if the actual experience of a global pandemic that now has hit North America and hit the richest country in the world the hardest, will open people's eyes, hearts, and then maybe their wallets to supporting people in the developing world when the next pandemic comes, which all three of you have referenced, right? Is getting ready for when the next, is it Ebola or what is it, when the next wave comes. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about, as I said, maybe it's wishful thinking, but do you have any sense of whether the West, now having actually confronted a pandemic, may actually be prepared for the next one better in the developing world?
I mean, I'm happy to answer this one as well. I want to give the other panelists a chance to speak, but I mean, we definitely are seeing a deeper sense of empathy from a lot of people. I think the feeling that a Burundian mother feels when she has a complication due to pregnancy or when she finds out her child has malaria is probably similar to the anxiety and fear that a lot of North Americans have never really felt before when they find out that a family member is sick or that their kid's school is closed or whatnot.
That's right.
So we really do hope that this builds a sense of empathy for people and a solidarity, social solidarity with the communities that we serve, because these are problems that these people confront on a daily basis, year in and year out.
Thanks, Wade. Everard, Valerie's interested to hear more from you about collaborating with the local governments and whether that could be something that develops long term. Is there an opportunity there for you?
Sure. So as I mentioned, there was a decentralization of COVID response mechanism from the central level to the local district level. So currently, we have a task force with all the the key teams with surveillance, testing, contact tracing. So we hope that kind of mechanism will stay, not only for COVID, but to kind of have that structure at the district level for almost all health-related issues. We are fortunate to have such a strong government, both at the central but also at the district. But we want to take those advantages, those benefits, to see if we can, continue to strengthen the health system. I wanted also to also highlight the regional collaboration. COVID is it's a cross-border. The virus doesn't care about borders. It's very essential to have that regional as well as global collaboration. I think Wade mentioned that we were so happy to see how the African Union, the African CDC tried to coordinate at the African Union level for things around supply chain, for example. So we hope, really, we wish that kind of collaboration will stay longer. Yeah.
That's great, Everard. Thank you. I'm going to have one more question. I've had a few sent to me, which is terrific. I think you mentioned this, and maybe one of you could say more about it. Do you find that the pandemic is restricting people accessing, basic and essential medical services, particularly around maternal health? Are you finding that being disrupted in a significant way? Musu, did you want to respond to that first?
Maternal health?
Mm-hmm. Are people accessing these services less? Like, is there access to it being disrupted?
Well, I think I don't have any direct information about access to services, but we know that with the containment efforts that had things like lockdown rules or restrictions on movement, that really affected people's ability to, say, access food distribution sites or access markets and things like that. And in our context, when we're talking about hunger and food, we're talking about access to more and better food. So if you don't have enough food or you don't have the right kinds of food, that it is affecting maternal and child health. Because so when we're talking about malnutrition, we're always looking at pregnant and nursing mothers, because their health impacts the health of their children and their own health, of course. But so yes, is it having an impact? Absolutely.
Yes.
We're seeing that rise in malnutrition already as a result of the containment efforts. I think you've heard Everard say that COVID itself is not impacting communities as a health issue. It's the containment issues and the knockoff effects of the economic downturn that is really having an impact on a lot of the communities where we work.
Right. Thanks so much, Musi. Wade, did you want to jump in there?
Just really briefly, we've changed the triage area at our clinic in a way so we're seeing less patients. So I think when you see less patients, you're going to have more health problems. We're also seeing people travel less. It's harder to get around because of the COVID. So yeah, I think we don't have hard numbers in terms of like the maternal mortality rate or the skilled birth rates or things like that yet. We're starting to track these things. We do on a quarterly basis, but they haven't made it this far yet.
Sure.
But my predictions based on what I said earlier is that we will see severe disruptions and increases in maternal mortality rates and infant mortality rates because of this, even if it's not affecting Burundi, the disease necessarily.
Right, absolutely. Thanks, Wade. Friends, we're at the end of our time together. And I'm going to ask each of our panelists to just give us a final answer to a final question. We've got about 2 minutes each. And I'd love to hear from Everard starting first. Given what you and your organization have faced in the past 6 months, what's your message to us today at PWRDF, one of your partner organizations? And are there new and different ways that we need to be thinking about partnership and collaboration? And feel free to challenge us. We're on Zoom, so you can say really whatever you'd like. So Everard, please tell us, what are those what's your message to us here at PWRDF?
Thank you, Jenny. I wanted first really to thank PWRDF for the solidarity and collaboration. We've been working together over the last 4 years. We hope and wish to continue for years to come. Two, three things. One, as I mentioned, COVID shows that with the weak health system, there will be, tragedy and many people will just die. It's very essential to build a strong health system foundation. And here I mean to put in place, infrastructure, train staff, equipment, system, data monitoring, research, to make investment around that. That's one. Two, because that system will help to mitigate not only COVID, but routine other services. Pregnant women will be able to have safe space to give birth. People with malaria, with HIV, with hepatitis, they'll be able to have strong system that will take care of them. That's one. Two, I think it's equity and solidarity. I think those are very, strong words that, should inspire all of us when we make investment. How could we not only focus to, communities in low resource setting, but also the most marginalized, the poorest of the poor. Very important. And then, of course, solidarity. How can we work together with communities, organization, government for that? Thank you so much for having me on this discussion. It was a very fruitful discussion.
Thanks, Everett. Before I pass on to the next member, I'd just love to hear a little bit about how your organization is keeping people motivated during the pandemic. And we're 6 months in here in Canada, and I can tell you that we're all looking forward to putting 2020 into the dustbin of history. So we feel like we're reaching our limit. How are you keeping people motivated in your organization at this time?
Well, very, very good question, but also very difficult question. Here everyone was affected by COVID. Many people lose their job, families, schools are still closed here. I think those messages of solidarity, we tried as much as we can to not, kick anyone out, to keep our staff. It's not easy with all the resources, divided into COVID, but we try as much as we can to stay together. PIH staff, the community we serve, to not just, socially disconnected. We are trying to stay where people really need us most. We didn't move to go to cities. We stayed in our 3 districts where we work. I think that presence means a lot for the communities we serve. It's also through a platform like this where we can share this message of solidarity.
That's great. Thank you, Everett. Musu, thinking about what you've had to face over the past 6 months and those ongoing challenges and opportunities, what's your message to us here at PWRDF? And are there any new and different ways that we need to be thinking about our partnership and our collaboration?
Thank you. At Food Grains Bank, we have 4 invitations that we regularly send out to Canadians to participate in the work of the Food Grains Bank and to join into what's happening all around the world. And those 4 invitations are to give, to pray, to learn, or to advocate. Everybody has something that they can contribute to this effort to end global hunger. And I want to emphasize 2 today for people who are listening to this. The first one, you're already giving, so I want to say thank you for that. And so that's not what I want to emphasize today. We have been fortunate. We've seen Canadians respond with generosity, I think out of the sense of solidarity that we've heard about. It's the first time in my living memory that the whole world is being affected by the same thing at the same time, in similar ways. We're all in the same storm, even though we're not in the same boats. But I want to emphasize also prayer. As people of faith, prayer is an important part of how we contribute to seeing each other through this storm. World Food Day is coming up, and Food Grains Bank has produced 2 resources that can be used to help focus your prayers on these issues around food security. We have one called Praying Through the Pandemic, and His Kingdom Banquet Come, that's particularly for World Food Day. And already many Anglican congregations will be using that resource to guide their services on World Food Day weekend, which I think is October 18th or so. We also talked about give, pray, learn, and advocate. And the advocate is the other one I want to emphasize about a different way of engaging in this work, which is thanking the government for the efforts that they've already made, for the contributions that they're making. World Food Day is October 16th. I saw that question come up. But advocating and encouraging our government to continue to be, to increase its contributions as a global citizen. We as Canadians are demonstrating amazing compassion and generosity to food banks and to organizations like Canadian Food Grains Bank contributing to the global. And so we want as a government for us to be represented on the world stage in similar ways. And there's a lot of room for the government to contribute more than it's contributing based on the level of income that we enjoy as a country. So advocate and prayer are the 2 invitations that I would really emphasize today here, and continue to give and continue to learn more about these issues.
That's terrific. Thanks, Musa. You said our 4 is to give, to pray, to learn, and to advocate.
Advocate, yes. The more we know, the better our responses will be.
Right, both in action and in prayer.
That's right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Wade, you get to be last but not least. Given all that your organization in Burundi has been focusing in the last 6 months, especially around building your hospital, what's your message to us here at PWRDF? And are there any new and fresh ways that we should look at collaborating in this strange and challenging season?
Yeah, I do like challenging people to think about these things. It's harder with you guys because you walk the walk and talk the talk, but I'll try my best to make this a little bit controversial.
We're about to end the panel, Wade, be careful.
I think we're looking at a time when, you know, a threat to health anywhere is a threat to health everywhere. And I think that's an important thing to think about it, that we are a global world these days more so than ever. And that we simply can't wait for the external conditions to be optimal to really lean in. And so I think it's important that we think about partnership, to work together to try to fight the biggest challenging problems with the boldest solutions. And I think that, like, if there's anything that I hope that I've put forth is that, like, yes, gloves and masks and wash is essential, but really, if we can't do, that's not enough, and will only temporarily help. So I think the challenge is that we need to continue to find ways to think about the more expensive things. And how do we do that? It's not easy to say, send over some more gloves, or it's easy to say, send over some more gloves, but how do you say, help us finish a $22 million hospital? You know, it's a very different type of conversation. But I think these are some things that we grapple with all the time. And it's hard to get people to pay attention to that area of the world. It's even harder when you try to tell them that the people in that world deserve dignified, quality care. And so I just challenge each of you to think about how to convince people that this is a global world and that it takes bold solutions, because whether it's prayer, whether it's advocacy, whether it's screaming at the top of the mountain, we need all the help we can to really kind of change the way that people think about helping people. All the people on this panel are doing that. I think all the people on the Zoom call are part of that effort. So, but there's a lot more that can be done, and I just challenge you to continue to push.
Thanks so much, Wade. Well, friends, on your behalf, I would like to thank very much Musu, Everard, and Wade for sharing their time, their expertise, their passion with each of us this afternoon. I think we have been encouraged, and I think we have been challenged to that bold action that Wade just talked about. Here at PWRDF, we're really privileged to be in partnership with you, and we do pray God's great blessings on you and on the communities that you serve. And we're really grateful for your time this afternoon in these extraordinary days. Thank you. And I'd ask everyone on the Zoom call to kind of wave their hands or clap their hands as an expression of our gratitude to each and every one of you.
Thank you. And thank you, Zaida, and best of luck in your retirement. You've been a great partner with us over the years. So thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much, Bishop Jenny, for that moderating that you did with the panel. And thank you to the panel members. I'm not sure if they've all left, but Everard, thank you for joining us, and Musu and Wade. Very challenging. Thank you. Challenging times, and I hope that we all can be encouraged to show empathy and compassion for everyone. And at this time, I'd like to, there is a little bit of space for questions and conversation, and I'm going to turn it over to Will. I know there's one question out there from Jane that you may like to address.
Okay, thanks, Valerie. I think the question from Jane was about how much funding we're receiving from Global Affairs Canada. Correct me, Jane, in the text, but we're receiving, hey, we are one of a few Canadian organizations that have received additional funds to respond to COVID-19 through our All Mothers and Children Count program. We're really grateful. Almost $2 million additional dollars have come to us, but I should say that money is coming to us kind of as a complement to what we are able to raise from amongst ourselves on that 6-to-1 match that had been referenced also by Valerie in her report. But I have to say also, with Musu here, and maybe Jim is still here, we access funding from the Government of Canada also through our relationship with Canadian Food Grains Bank. So we're really pleased for that relationship. Yeah, Jane, was that the question you were asking around Global Affairs funding? I'm not sure if you wanted to unmute and just clarify.
Yes, okay. I'm unmuted now. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Will. Okay. My question is, what portion of our budget, how much compared to what comes from our Anglican donors comes from Global Affairs Canada? And I ask this because of my concern for the fact that AMCC, All Children Count, that program is ending. You know, what happens in the future in terms of our own revenues?
Yeah, great question. In this year, for this current year, the funding from the Government of Canada is about 1/4 to 1/3 of our revenue that supports all of our programs. And we receive revenue, of course, from many other places. But yes, we definitely want to look forward in terms of continued funding from institutions like Global Affairs Canada, but also others who can support what I know to be really good work. And listening to Wade and Everard and Musu, we know there's really important work that PWRDF wants to continue to support. Yeah, so that government relationship is important, but we're looking at other possibilities of support as well. And I know Zaida, and just let me give that extra shout out to Zaida, as a few of you have mentioned. This is her last year with PWRDF. We're in a series of lasts, including her last annual general meeting, her last time with us. There will be more moments to say thank you. And Roz, you were asking about that, but Zaida is working really hard in terms of proposal writing, working with her team, with her staff to put more proposals in front of other institutional donors. So we'll have time with Zaida to say thank you and all those good things in the remaining months. But really pleased. Yeah, hey, I wanted to say thank you to staff at some point, but Valerie, maybe there are a few more questions for others here as well.
Are there any more questions? Michelle, are there any more on the chat?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Can I just answer a question that I saw, and was a question about PIH and village health workers. They are local organizations. They have offices, or maybe in other parts of the world, but in the case of Rwanda and Burundi, they operate locally, they are registered locally, and as Everett said, 99, Village Wade said, 90% of their staff are local staff. So just want to clarify that.
Thank you. Okay, back to you, Will.
Okay, thanks, Valerie. You know, this is a really important community moment. I know Bishop Jenny, who moderated that session just so remarkably well, just mentioned how tough this year is. We may want to forget about this year, but I don't think we can forget about this really good moment together, all of us on Zoom, and many others who are watching on YouTube live streams. So, so it's a good community moment. I do want to just thank staff. Valerie, you mentioned that, but I certainly want to thank Zaida and Carolyn and Elsa. Suzanne and Janice are with us on Zoom, and many others of our staff are watching on the YouTube link. So give yourselves a pat on the back, but we work together as a team. We're so pleased to be working with PWRDF. We're so committed to our vision for justice, for health, for peace in this world, and how much we need that. And a big thank you to all of us here. Everard, you're calling late at night from Rwanda. It seems like you're next door. Wade, you're calling from a place that we are praying for, New York City and the United States, so very, very much. And Musu, you are a friend to PWRDF and a friend to the ecumenical community, and always so supportive, accessible, available. We're so grateful. Yeah, I just wanted to share those words of thanks, and just a reminder also of the wonderful opportunity to listen to the Primate one more time, September 27 on Sunday. It'll be on her Facebook page. I believe it's 7 p.m. Toronto time, that's Eastern time. So calculate it. She will be playing hymns in support of the Ride for Refuge. We're grateful for the Primate and all she does for us, and all those who are supporting Ride for Refuge, and all those who are giving to PWRDF in this really important, a troubling, but still a very important year. So a big thanks. That's all I needed to share, Valerie. I know we're a few minutes beyond time, but it was a good time and a good moment. Valerie, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Will. And I do want to add my thanks to the staff, the amazing staff that put this together and do so much for the most vulnerable. And thank you again to the panel discussion participants. Wonderful. And also to our other special guests that joined us today, Jim Cornelius and Kathy and Jamie. And congratulations to Jim on his retirement in one more time, and Jane on her award. Thanks to everyone participating today. It's been wonderful to have so many of you with us. I hope that you've had an opportunity to learn more about this wonderful organization, PWRDF, and to engage in good trouble, as the late Senator John Lewis described the struggle for justice, peace, and the health of our planet. So thank you again, and we will say goodbye to everyone. I would like to remind just the board members that in about 13 minutes we'll be reconvening with our first board meeting with the new board. So thank you, everyone. Is there any further business? Yes, Dan.
I'd like to close the meeting in prayer.
Thank you.
Any other new business? No. Tonight, the spirit of this meeting is so uplifting. I want to just close with an excerpt from a great prayer that's on the homepage of PWRDF called A Visual Prayer for PWRDF. The words by Will Postma, the reader, who might be one of our friends, and brilliantly written by Suzanne Rumsey, who was inspired by the words of Praying with PWRDF's parish, in quotes. And of course, the music on the online version by Dream Master, written and performed by Ron St. Marie from the Territory of the People. Let us pray. God, child spirit, in this pandemic time, hold us, the people and partners of PWRDF, in your loving embrace. Walk with us as we continue on the journey towards a truly just, healthy, and peaceful world. Amen.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan. And is there any more business? Hearing none, I would like to adjourn the annual general meeting of PWRDF at 12:19 Pacific time. Take care, and we'll see you all soon, I hope.